Could you lose your job for saying that biological sex is more important than gender identity?
Of course you can't.
Perhaps the most famous case involved Maya Forstater.
She was downright abusive and nasty and horrific. It wasn't just, I have gender critical beliefs. It was how she did it that was absolutely vile. If you've got someone who's spouting off gender critical views in the workplace, being nasty to people, that's a very different thing to having your own views.
Treating someone less favourably because they hold protected beliefs is generally unlawful.
You can hold your beliefs, you can express your beliefs, but how you express them is another matter. Sex, gender identity, law. Wow, that's going to be a big one. I see Michael Foran has got his new book out, and I'm sure there's going to be a following. I'm sure there's going to be some really excited people because after all, he's a professor, associate professor of law. But actually, do you know what? I'm just going to have a little listen to what he says and see if we can unpick it a little bit. Have a listen.
Could you lose your job for saying that, in some contexts, biological sex is more important than gender identity?
Of course you can't. You can't have someone say biological sex is more important than gender identity and then you lose your job. It's actually much more important than that. What exactly are you saying? Are you hurting anybody in saying it? And who are you saying it to? That's what's important.
Gender critical belief is defined in law as the view that biological sex is binary, unchangeable and important.
I'm not quite sure that's the actual definition, but biological sex is important, but it doesn't tell us what our gender identity is going to be. And that's what's really crucial. And people like Michael say, and you can't change your biological sex? No, you can't change your chromosomes, but you can change your anatomy and you can change your hormones. And also, if you actually read the Equality Act, it protects characteristics. And one of those is gender reassignment. And gender reassignment is defined as reassigning your sex, either planning to, doing it, thinking about doing it, wanting to do it, done it, reassigning your sex. So these people who will have you believe you can't reassign your sex, you can. And that's what people do all the time. And they are protected under the Equality Act to do so. But then they use those great big words like, oh, you can't change your biological sex, meaning you can't change your chromosomes. Of course you can't. But you can definitely change your body and your hormones to match your gender identity. So let's listen to doctors as well as lawyers.
Courts now treat views of this kind as protected under the Equality Act.
People's views have always been protected under the Equality Act. This is nothing new. Of course we're allowed to think and believe what we think and believe. We don't live in a society where you're not allowed to think that way or you're not allowed to believe that. But the issue is what you do with those beliefs. And I think we're just going to hear a famous case.
Perhaps the most famous case involved Maya Forstater, a researcher at a non-profit organisation whose contract was not renewed after she posted gender-critical opinions on social media.
Yeah, do you know what though? Let's get this straight. She didn't just post her gender-critical opinions on social media. She was downright abusive and nasty and horrific. It wasn't just, I have gender critical beliefs, or I don't believe that people can change their sex, or I believe there are only two sexes. It was how she did it that was absolutely vile. Even the judge said that her views were really, really nasty. However, she appealed, crowdfunded and appealed, and she won. And it was said that she was allowed to have her gender critical views. You're allowed to have your views. But listen, importantly, and this guy seems to forget the important bit, what they do say, and the appeal employment tribunal said, this does not mean that those with gender critical beliefs can misgender trans persons with impunity, and noted that acts of harassment and discrimination against trans people in the workplace are also prohibited by the Equality Act. So if you just extend it further, yes, you can have your views. If you shout them out loudly on social media, your employer might sack you because it doesn't fit with your employer's policy on reasonable behaviour. And then you can try and take them to the employment tribunal. The difficulty with Maya's case is that they didn't follow the policies. They were like, oh, we don't know what to do. We've got people being mean to trans people and we don't know what to do. And that's where the victimisation discrimination cases win, when your policy isn't fixed, you haven't got a good trans policy to go by, and then they get you in the employment tribunal. So employers and institutions, services, make sure you've got good policies and that you stick to them. And when someone goes spouting off with their gender critical views on social media, make sure that your policy is clear about what will happen to them, and make sure that when you go down those steps of doing that to them, you follow your policies. And that's how to keep yourself safe. So, Maya's case, yes, she's allowed to have her views. No, you're not allowed to just go spouting off inciting hatred towards trans people online. And you're not allowed to go around misgendering trans people with impunity. And she only won because her employer didn't follow the rules properly. Really important.
In 2021, the Employment Appeal Tribunal found that Forstater had been discriminated against, and that her beliefs were worthy of respect and worth protecting.
I'm not sure her beliefs are worthy of respect, but I guess globally, everybody's beliefs are worthy of respect. It's just what you do with them is what you need to be careful about.
That means that duty bearers, such as employers and service providers, cannot treat someone less favourably because of these views.
You're not allowed to treat someone less favourably, but that doesn't mean that they're just allowed to go and do anything they like with their views within your workplace or within your service. You have to treat everyone the same. You say, we don't allow these particular kinds of behaviours in our workplace, and if you do these particular kinds of behaviours, we'll take action against your contract. So just because your views might be worthy of respect for you doesn't mean that you're just allowed to go spouting them off in the workplace or destroying the reputation of your workplace or your institution or your service. That's the key.
Since the Forstater case, there have been several cases involving unlawful discrimination and harassment against those who have expressed gender-critical views. Because of the way equality law works, not holding gender-critical views is also protected.
And it's also protected, and it's also a darn sight nicer.
Meaning that employers and service providers should generally refrain from treating those who adopt one set of views on this topic less favourably than others.
I'm not so sure about that, actually. That doesn't mean that you're not allowed to treat somebody worse than somebody else because of something like that. That's the general principle. But if you've got someone who's spouting off gender-critical views in the workplace, being nasty to people, sharing their views, telling everybody else their views and trying to gather everybody around in the common room to say, let's not play with that person because that person's trans. That's a very different thing to having your own views. So you're not just allowed to go spreading your views and doing nasty things with them and making other people use your views against somebody else or another group of people. That's the key.
Having said that, there will be some circumstances in which it is lawful for an employer or service provider to interfere with how these beliefs are manifested.
Yeah. So if you've got shitty, nasty, horrible beliefs, keep them to yourself.
While it will not generally be acceptable to treat someone less favourably just because they have expressed views on this topic.
It's not just expressing views on the topic, though, is it, darling? It's how you express and who you express it to. And also who you lend your mobile phone to and logged in on Facebook. Let's not forget that one.
It will sometimes be lawful for an employer or service provider to limit the expression of views about sex and gender identity.
Yes, it will be. And if you've got a good policy that says we only allow good behaviour in our institution or our workspace, if you've got a good policy that says we are kind to everybody, we include everybody, we don't allow hateful speech, we don't allow discriminatory speech, we don't allow inciting of hatred, that if your policy says that, then that's what your employers have to stick by. And that goes for schools, that goes for GP surgeries, that goes for life. Just be nice.
The key question is whether this amounts to a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim.
I'm not really sure what he's talking about here, because he's talking about you're allowed to exclude people if there's a good reason to do it, and the way that you're doing it by excluding those people is the right way of achieving what you're supposed to be achieving. So I'm not really sure what he's going on about here. I think he might be confusing two things, and if you're listening, maybe you could enlighten me. But I thought we were talking about gender-critical beliefs and actually just being nice to people. So I'm not sure how if you're using your gender critical beliefs to exclude somebody because they're trans or a group of people because they're trans, then you're not allowed to do that, love.
Often, this will require a context-sensitive assessment. But two general points are worth remembering. First, treating someone less favourably because they hold or have expressed protected beliefs is...
You can hold your beliefs, you can express your beliefs, but how you express them is another matter. You know what? If you're feeling really, really angry about trans people and you don't want to accept that they can reassign their sex, then why don't you just go into the toilet on your own? Maybe you could go into the ladies' toilet on your own and shout really loudly. But you're not allowed to shout it loudly on social media, and you're not allowed to shout it loudly in the workplace or in any public space where other people will be listening because they're hurtful views, and other people who are trans people will be listening to your hurtful views and will be hurt by it. And you actually might be encouraging other people to also be hurtful to those trans people. And that is the key part of inclusion, equality, the Equality Act, the protection against discrimination and harassment and just being nasty.
Is generally unlawful. Second, interfering with the expression of protected beliefs will usually need to be justified by reference to the manner of the expression, not the fact of it.
Well, we agree on one thing. You can say, I have a gender critical belief. I don't believe that sex can be changed. I think there are only two sexes. And that's about it. You can't go spouting it off out there loudly. You can't go shouting at everybody. You can't use it to bring other people to come into your beliefs in order to hurt people. That's what the Equality Act protects against. There is no debate. The only debate we should be having is how to include trans people in everything that we do. And if you have a gender critical belief, go and pop it in the bin. There's a love. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and don't forget that I write about this all day, every day on my website. Come and have a visit, I'll see you there. Link is below.